And with that, we'll go ahead and get started. So should we template or patch Kubernetes manifests? Kustomize and Helm serve the same primary function. Both allow us to define applications in a more flexible way than using Kubernetes manifests. However, the way Helm solves the problem is very different than Kustomize. So which one is better? Which one should you choose? So Viktor Farcic is going to show you in this hands-on comparison. And with that, Viktor, take it away.
Okay. Let me put my whole face in front. For now, I will do the demo soon. For now, let's very quickly write what we are doing. Basically, essentially, if you're using Kubernetes, and I hope you are because it's 2021, you need to define your applications one way or another. Defining applications only using Kubernetes YAML and applying them only using kubectl does not work, simply because we always need something else, whatever that something is. There is always some change in one environment compared to another. Ingress host might be different. The number of replicas might be different from one place to another, and so on and so forth. There is an unavoidable need to be able to have some differences between your manifests depending on environments. And especially if you're using third-party software, then you definitely need to customize that, because almost nothing ever works out of the box without a single change somewhere. So we cannot use directly Kubernetes manifests with kubectl. We need something else. And the three main players that I know of, at least, to allow us the ability to modify, customize, adapt manifests depending on situations is Helm, Kustomize, and what is the third one? JSONnet, right? Now, I will not go into JSONnet today unless you ask me. So we're going to see how Kustomize and Helm solve specific problems, and that problem is how do we define and apply Kubernetes resources in Kubernetes clusters. Now, before I proceed, one very important thing here is that Helm does many other things that Kustomize doesn't do. Unless you ask me, and you can, and then we can go through it, I will not go through additional features. Today, I am, unless you ask me, focused on the ability to manipulate our definitions, our Kubernetes manifests, and apply them in our clusters, right? And I will be by default ignoring additional features either of the tools might provide, again, unless you ask me so. So what I will do is that I will now share my screen, and I have here two terminals. So I will be doing some hands-on parts just to show you how that works. And on the left side here will be Helm, and on the right side will be Kustomize. So you will be able to see both in parallel, how they are defined, how they react, how they work, and then we can comment about the differences and potential use cases when you might use one or over the other. Now, before I proceed, in case you're not familiar with one or both of those tools, you probably know Helm already. But anyways, the major difference between the two is that one, and that is Helm, is a templating mechanism. It allows us to create templates that are converted into Kubernetes manifests before they're propagated to Kube API, and then Kubernetes does something with them. Kustomize has a completely different approach. Kustomize uses pure Kubernetes manifests without any templating option. And it applies patches as a way to customize, to modify the default behavior of those pure Kubernetes manifests depending on specific situations. And those patches are very similar to what you would accomplish by executing kubectl patch and then some long JSON, except that in case of Kustomize, those patches are declarative and defining files in YAMLs or JSONs, stored in Git, and so on and so forth. But the essential difference is that Helm, templating engine, Kustomize, pure Kubernetes manifests, with additional instruction how to apply them in Kubernetes. So we are going to go through a few different scenarios. First one is, to begin with, always we need to define our application, right? What our application is. Now here I have already created, like in this directory, I can show you here. Here I have template. This is not good. -1 will work better. I have a chart here on the left side. It has typical chart, templates, and few different values files depending on the environment I will use. And in templates, I didn't complicate the life of everybody. This is a simple demo because I want to prove the point rather than go into something amazingly complicated. It's a simple definition of a simple application. It has a deployment, an ingress service, ingress actually, and the service. On the other hand, I have Kustomize. That is basically, if you go to this directory, provides here the same thing: deployment, ingress. I have additional namespace just in case here, service, and customization. Customization, you can think of it as equivalent of Helm values file, which I will show you later if you're not familiar. So the first difference, if you're defining a new application in Helm, on one hand, we need to predict in advance, not necessarily in advance, but we need to at least try to predict the permutations that we might have with that application, with that chart. And as such, for example, if you look at Helm templates ingress, you will see that this is a typical ingress definition, except that it has certain placeholders for templates. So instead of hard-coded name, it will be switched to the name of the release that is gotten from the Helm command. And more importantly here, for example, since I could not predict what will be the host in advance where this application will be deployed, because it might be different host in staging than in production, I created a value here, or a template snippet, let's say, that will allow me to specify what is my host, right? So this is pure templating. It is using Go templating for that. Now, equivalent of that in Kustomize would be this. Now you will see that there is no template here, simply because at the very early stages, I do not need to template anything with, or I don't need the capabilities of templating with Kustomize. I can just say, hey, this is going to be pure YAML format, because I know that whomever needs to modify it later can apply a patch. And I will show you later how that patch works. But for now, I'm more concerned how it will look by default. And then later on, we're going to see how we can customize. Now,
hey, Viktor, I have a question.
Oh, brilliant. Go, shoot.
All right. So from Sadesh, if Helm is templating and Kustomize is manifest, can we embed Kustomize manifest as a part of Helm charts to use templating features?
Yes, there are. I haven't used it much myself, but there are ways to basically, what you can do is you can have a Helm chart that you can use Helm template command, something like this, Helm template, and that would convert your this command would convert your Helm chart into pure Kubernetes YAML, and then you can use that as customized YAML and do whichever additional operations you want to do. So you can and I've seen people. I haven't done it myself much. I haven't seen sufficient reason to do that, but I've seen people do it, especially if they're transitioning from one to another. So you can use chart, convert it to Kubernetes YAML, and then use it with Kustomize to do additional changes, whichever changes you might need.
Thanks, Viktor. That's the only question for now, but keep them coming, everyone.
Brilliant. Where was it? Yes, ingress, right? Now, so in case of Helm, now since I showed you right here ingress, I need to have additional values that will be converted into that this template will use to convert it into final value. So I have this here in Helm values.yaml. And if you focus on, sorry, let me put a bit of space between. If you focus only on ingress, ignore the rest, I can see, hey, ingress host here is defined as helm.devopstoolkitseries.com, right? And then if you want to apply both of those, on one hand, I would do Helm upgrade -- install. I never use Helm install directly. It's a silly command, toolkit Helm. And then I would specify namespace would be Helm dev and create namespace, right? Since this is the first time I'm installing it, and I will have the template converted into YAML, passed to Kubernetes API, and something is running in my cluster over there. Now with Kustomize, Kustomize is intentionally focused on one thing and one thing only, and that is to generate Kubernetes manifests. So you cannot use even Kustomize to deploy something to apply something to Kubernetes. It is just about creating final manifests for Kube API. So the command would be, I'm going to create a namespace. I forgot whether I defined it in Kustomize or no. So just to be on the safe side, I will create it. Anyways, so to do it with Kustomize, it would be Kustomize build, Kustomize base. This is where I have the files that I showed you before. And then since Kustomize cannot deploy anything anywhere, I would need to pipe it to kubectl -- namespace Kustomize dev and apply file name -- right? So Kustomize relies on kubectl or whichever tool you might be using to communicate with Kubernetes to do the actual work of propagating it to the API. What did I do? I'm missing E. Here we are. Anyway, the end result after all this is the same. I have my applications running in my cluster. We can see that kubectl -n get namespaces, kubectl -n Helm dev, get all, for example, including ingresses. And you see it's deployed. And similarly, I can do kubectl -n Kustomize dev get all comma ingresses, and I get them, right? So the end result is the same. How we get there is different. Now, when we think about it, if I focus now only on this, only on the initial definition of what I need, without ignoring what comes afterwards, and we're going to talk about it, Kustomize, at least in my opinion, is much easier because it allows us to focus on Kubernetes YAML, which we need to focus no matter what we're doing. And we can skip the whole templating, putting curly braces in different places and then values and all those things. It's just pure Kubernetes. It's so much easier on day one. We're going to get to what happens later, but on day one, it makes it so much easier as a way to define it initially.
Viktor, I have a couple questions. Is this a good time?
Yes.
All
Every
right.
time is good time.
So you mentioned transitioning from one to another a few minutes ago. From which to which are people transitioning these days?
I heard from people moving I know cases of people moving from Helm to Kustomize, but that's personal experience. I cannot say that you should not think of that statement as being that nobody moves from Kustomize to Helm. My experience with people is that if anybody moves from one to another, that's from Helm to Kustomize, but that's my personal experience. I don't have data to back that up. There might be the other way around as well.
Choose which one is right for you, right? That's what this webinar is about.
Exactly.
Too. So, and Rasmus asks, couldn't kubectl -k some files be somewhat considered deploying something directly with Kustomize, just without the advanced release management in Helm?
Yes, but the state of kubectl -k is a very bad one, a horrible one. So what happened, and I haven't checked it for a month, so the situation might have changed, but basically they included the team behind Kustomize, included Kustomize library into kubectl so that you can use Kustomize directly from kubectl, and then considering only that, you're absolutely right, that would be considered also the ability to deploy. However, the Kustomize included in kubectl is an old one. I think that the one in kubectl is 2 point something and the one in Kustomize is 3 point something. Don't hold me for versions. I'm not sure whether, but anyways, I'm not using it myself because it's quite a lot behind. And as far as I know, nobody's trying to fix it because there are some issues with the conflicts and what's or not. And basically nobody's working that I know of on getting Kustomize inside of kubectl up to date. Now, whether the features that are available in your one are important for you or no, would lead you towards using directly kubectl or Kustomize. I tend to use Kustomize simply binary, simply not to think about the potential compatibility issues, what I can, what I cannot do, and stuff like that.
And one more question before you move on. This is from Lalita. If I want to give customers a deploy tool from a dashboard in an assigned Kubernetes cluster namespace, which one is useful, Helm or Kustomize along with GitOps?
Both are, from GitOps perspective, both are equally good, let's say. I prefer keeping, if when using Helm, I prefer keeping my charts in a Git repository, not in some chart repository, you know, chart museum or what's or not, because that gets me closer to those manifests. It's easier for me to inspect it there than in a chart museum or whichever other registry you might be using. But other than that, from GitOps perspective, it doesn't really matter. Whatever you're more comfortable with and whatever is more useful to you outside of the scope of GitOps. So either of, I wouldn't make my decision whether to use one or the other based on the relation with GitOps. Both work pretty fairly well with both ArgoCD and Flux, right? Two major players in that area. So either make a decision independently of GitOps, then you will see a couple of other examples that might help you soon make that decision.
Sounds good. That's all the questions for now. Thanks, Viktor.
Brilliant. Okay. So now that was day one, right? And in my opinion, Kustomize is easier simply because I don't need to think much about templating, variables, whatever. I just have pure YAML. Now, if you think about, if you go, let's say into day two and start thinking about how will that application be deployed in different environments, let's say development and production, staging, whichever environments you have, you need to start introducing variations between the manifests you're using. Now, in case of Helm, those variations are basically, one example of those variations would be this, right? Here I have a different, ignore the commented parts. They will become important later. Imagine that whatever is commented doesn't exist. Train your brain to ignore comments in this case. So let's say that in production, I want to use a different host address for my application than wherever I deployed it a few minutes ago, right? So in case of Helm, I would create a new file with values that would overwrite the default values. And I would say, hey, use the default values as they are. But when deploying to production, I want you to overwrite the default value of ingress to be host and this value of the host, like Helm production devostoolkitseries.com, right? Now, the same thing in Kustomize would be that I would, before I showed you the base directory, now I'm showing you different directory. Directory can be anything. There is unwritten standard that we specify additional environments in overlays and then some name. So I have here customization YAML inside of directory overlays production that contains specifics for my production environment. Remember, in case of Helm, those specifics are all part of the same chart. Now here, to accomplish more or less the same result, what I'm telling Kustomize, hey, use those YAML definitions that I showed 15 minutes ago, but add the namespace as additional thing, which is production namespace. And I want you to patch the ingress. I want you to use this file to patch my ingress. So ingress stays as is. That YAML file that I showed initially, it stays it is, but we are going to modify it. And we're going to modify the one that is based on networking Kubernetes IO, ingress, and the one called DevOps Toolkit, right? So this is customized way to say, hey, I would like to patch that specific resource that is defined in this file. And that patch itself looks something like this. So this here file that I'm using to patch is like this. Basically, I want you to replace specification rules, the first entry, and then the host. And I'm intentionally showing you more complicated example than a simpler one. Majority of patches are potentially easier to grasp than this. So I want you to overwrite this path in that ingress definition and to put this value, right? And then if you want to apply those things, I would do Helm upgrade, -- install, DevOps Toolkit, Helm is the directory, and I want you to do it in a namespace, Helm production, and I want you to create namespace. And what else do I want you to do? Yes, and I want to use this new set of values that are going to override default ones, which are in this file that I showed before, right? And we hit enter, and that's it, right? Now, in case of Kustomize, it's almost the same as before. Kustomize, build, what was it? The directory is sorry, my bad. Kustomize, build, and the directory is Kustomize overlays production. And we want to pipe it to kubectl apply -- file name dash, right? And the magic happens. Now, and this is all my personal opinion, which might differ, right? If you're talking now about shifting left, enabling developers who might not necessarily have a lot of knowledge and deep understanding about Kubernetes, Helm approach is much easier because you can say, hey, you don't need to worry about the chart. All you have to worry about is this file, to create a file and say which values you want to overwrite, and that's it. Now, if I would give the same set of instructions to somebody who is not really proficient with Kubernetes for Kustomize, explaining potentially how to create a new customization is potentially more complicated. I mean, not potential, it is more complicated. Now, from developer perspective, manipulating values file is so much easier. Now, from the perspective of somebody who is writing those definitions, in this specific scenario, I'm not sure. On one hand, for chart, you need to predict in advance what will be all the permutations you need. Kustomize, on the other hand, allows you to postpone those definitions and just apply patches for specific situations. Personally, to me, from the perspective of sysadmin, patching is easier because it's simply, for me, easier to comprehend what is going on without too many curly braces, templates, and so on and so forth. But I can understand that even from sysadmin perspective, or the perspective of somebody who is proficient with Kubernetes, Helm might be equally simple or equally complicated from the definition perspective. And as a user, as a developer, there is absolutely no doubt that YAML file, values file, changing just few values, you never need to know that there are YAML files involved, sounds much easier and more user-friendly.
Victor, I have a few more questions. Now, you up for them?
Yes, please.
All right, let's do it. If a microservice is having its own DB, which one will be better to use? Does it depend on the factor of having DB or persistence volume?
I'm not sure I understand the question. Is the question related which one, whether Kustomize or Helm to use, or?
I think so. I'm going to guess that, but let us know. This was anonymous, so let us know in the chat if we understood that correctly.
Yeah, so I will assume that, yeah, which one refers to Helm or Kustomize. It really, at the end result is the same. I don't think it really, the decision depends much whether it's a stateful set that will have persistent volumes or it's a deployment. It's more about what makes it easier to manipulate, to create definitions that will ultimately allow you to generate YAML, pure YAML one way or another. So I don't think it really depends much on whether you're using a database or not.
Thanks, Victor. And he did confirm that was the question. So thank you for that. And the next one is, isn't it more complicated using Kustomize as it requires a more in-depth knowledge of kubectl than in Helm, which only relies on one specific definition for the resources?
Yes. That's kind of the point which I was trying to make before, that from a perspective of somebody who is not very experienced with Kubernetes, Helm is definitely easier, because you can just go and say, hey, I know nothing about deployments and services and ingresses and all the stuff. Tell me which values I can change. I'm going to change those values, and off I go. Basically, anybody can understand that there is a file with some properties values that you modify to customize how you work with something. And so from inexperienced person perspective, let's see, I'm going to call it developer, even though we are all developers, we all write code today. Helm is easier. From perspective of experienced, at least in my case, I feel that Kustomize is easier. So kind of like it's win some, lose some, because you cannot really have it all. Kustomize allows me to do things that I believe are harder in Helm than in Helm, but at the cost of making it difficult for those who are not very familiar with Kubernetes.
All right, we have a few more questions for you if you're up for them now. The next one is, great. How can the configurations on the cluster be rolled back to release, which was applied 2 patches ago using Kustomize?
Yes. So I strongly believe that today we shouldn't be applying directly rollbacks, no matter whether we are using kubectl directly or Kustomize or Helm or JSONet or any of those things. Today, I believe that we should be controlling those things by storing some definitions, no matter the format, in Git. And if I want to roll, and the head of my master branch in Git should always represent the desired state that I want the cluster to be in. And that means that if I want to roll back, I will either make a new commit that will be the same as 2 commits ago, or I will revert the commit in Git. I'm very much focused. I'm strongly believer that nothing should be neither rolled back nor forward, that we should never change state of the cluster directly, like what I'm doing right now. I'm doing this only for the demo. In real world situations, I do not execute Kustomize this. I do not execute Helm that. I always store the manifests in Git. I have process that converges that state in Git into the state of the cluster, the actual state. This is only for the demo. I hope that answers your question. Just if I misunderstand the question, you keep them coming, and I will explain better.
And then one more question from Sadesh. Kustomize looks like a tactical fix mechanism, where Helm looks like a more strategic fix mechanism where it comes to Kubernetes. Do you agree? Can you share your views?
I'm not sure what tactical fix would be. I think that they are all flowed in different ways. One is less user-friendly. The other one is more complicated for complicated stuff. One example that where I think that the differences between Helm and Kustomize become more apparent is when we use third-party applications, right? Probably everybody in this call has at least one application that is deployed with Helm or Kustomize, hopefully, or will soon have. that is a third party. So now, what we're having, if you jump into third-party applications, let's say that you want to install Prometheus, right? I'm just inventing now example. You go there and say, this is the Helm chart of Prometheus, excellent. You change 5 values to make it work as you want it to work. Let's say that you change 1 value to decide what will be the host of Prometheus UI. And off you go, you're done like this. If you want to do it with Kustomize, you will go to either Prometheus already has customized definitions. I'm not sure, and I would need to check. Or if it doesn't, it's very easy to convert pure Prometheus YAML into Kustomize. That's 2 minutes work. Anyways, but if you want to change ingress, it will take more time. But here comes the big difference. Let's say that you want to use that Prometheus allows you to change the host value, a third-party app, of the ingress that is based on Nginx. And let's say that in your cluster, you're using Istio, just for the sake of argument, and that you don't want any ingress. You want ingress, but you don't want Nginx ingress of any of those things. You want Istio gateway to manage the incoming traffic to your Prometheus UI. And that's third party, right? You cannot modify it. What can you do? You can fork that and change it to include Istio gateway, but then you will have problem upgrading, right? You can create a chart that has your own chart that has a dependency on Prometheus chart, but that's clunky and really ugly. Basically, you don't have a good solution for that. Or maybe to manage that Istio gateway outside of the chart of Prometheus, which also complicates things a lot. Now, if I would be using Kustomize for that same example, I would say, okay, I create Kustomize YAML. It goes to Istio Prometheus definition, wherever it's stored. I don't even need to copy it to my repo. I can reference specific tag in Prometheus repository, and I'm going to apply this patch, for example, or no, I wouldn't need even to apply the patch. I will just add in that Kustomize.yaml second entry in resources and say, and on top of all that, I want you to apply this YAML that is Istio gateway. So it's much easier for me to extend third-party apps to do exactly what I want. But in cases where the existing values that are already thought through by the community, in this case of Prometheus, are not what I need. Now, if Prometheus gives you what you need, then Helm is definitely easier because you just change few values. If it doesn't give you what you need, then Kustomize becomes easier. And you will probably notice that I don't have the answer that applies to all the cases, which one is better. I'm just trying to give you different use cases because I myself use both, and depending on the situation, one or the other.
I have several more questions. Viktor, you want to hold them for a little bit and continue, or keep them rolling?
Hey, if I can keep them rolling as long as there are questions.
All right,
I like answering questions more than showing the demo.
Sounds good. So as a cloud infrastructure engineer, the product devs are the ones who are our customers and want to be able to create new microservices and update environment variables. For companies using Kustomize, how have the product devs felt about it?
That's the thing. I feel, and again, I'm talking from personal experience, I don't have the industry-wide data. Devs tend to be happier with Helm. But infrastructure engineers tend to be happier with Kustomize, and then we have a problem, right? Kind of, do you make yourself less effective by satisfying others, or do you make yourself more effective by not satisfying enough others? There is that balance that is very hard to. Like the example with Prometheus, to me, that's a clear winner, even if devs are going to suffer a bit. And devs might never need to know about Prometheus. And I see a lot of cases lately where people use both, and depending on the use case, for one use case, choose Helm, the other one, Kustomize. But yes, devs are happier with Helm, tend to be happier with Helm, and what you call cloud infrastructure engineers happier with Kustomize.
Thank you. And Victor, I might have you look at the Q&A for the next question. If you could pull open just your Q&A button, just because there's a code example. So Jersey asks, why not simply patch using a partial manifest instead of using targets? And he's kind of shown an example here.
Is that Jurassic Filho?
Yes, yes.
Okay. Let me see the patch, blah, 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 yes. Yes, I definitely want to show a bit more complicated example, even though yes, this would be easier to do actually. Yes, your example is easier than mine. I just want to show something that is a bit more kind of like freaky, let's say, and for that simple application couldn't find anything that really justifies it, but you caught me. Yes, that would be easier. In the follow-up later, if I have time, I have an example with actually here. Let me put on a screen so that everybody sees. If I look at to change the deployment with Kustomize, I would have something like this. This would be equivalent of the example you pasted, right? When I'm modifying a deployment with this name and just modifying the container called DevOps Toolkit to add those things that did not exist before in that deployment. Imagine that somebody forgot to put it, or that was not needed for anybody but that specific environment or something like that. I think that this is very simple, very similar to the example you put. I'm butchering the names. I think it was Juanjo or something like that.
Okay, and I have another question from Mehmet. How good is ArgoCD in terms of CI? I mean, to release new versions and keep different versions across multiple environments like dev, prod, etc.
So how good is ArgoCD in terms of CI? So ArgoCD is not CI. ArgoCD is not, I think that ArgoCD has a terrible name. It should never have been called ArgoCD, because I believe that's very misleading, because continuous delivery is about automating the whole process of from committing something to Git, pushing something to Git repository until it is running in production. That would be CD, and CI would be part of that process. Anyways, it's a bunch of steps usually defined in a pipeline. I don't think that that's what ArgoCD is doing. What ArgoCD is doing is that it is only working on the deployment part, right? I have my definition in Git. I have an agent in my cluster that is monitoring that Git repository, and whenever I change my manifest, whether it's Kustomize, Helm, pure Kubernetes, JSON, it doesn't matter, ArgoCD will fetch those changes and apply them to the cluster so that whatever is in a cluster is the same as the desired state defined in form of manifest in a Git repository. So ArgoCD is doing only deployments. Now, the fair comparison, the better question would be, how good is Argo Workflows in terms of CI or CD for that? I mean, in terms of automating pipelines or workflows that you have in form of automated processes. And in that case, the answer would be that it's absolutely awesome. Argo Workflows, if I would replace your question, Argo CD with Argo Workflows in that question, I would say that Argo Workflows is one of the very few that are Kubernetes native pipelines / workflows type of tools. And it happens to be my favorite right now.
Thank you, Victor. Great round of questions. We have about 18 minutes left. So if you want to continue with the demo, and then we'll see if we have some questions at the end.
Cool. So now, another one of the many other scenarios that you might run into is, let's say that that I have something that nobody thought of that I need, and I need it only in one environment, only for me, not for the rest of the team, not for the rest of the company. I need change that applies only to me. Now, in case of Helm, let's say that only for me, even though it's a very simple, silly example, I want to add resources to deployment, but only for me. Remember, that's important part of the story. Now, if I would do that in Helm, first thing I would probably do is imagine that this is not commenting, that I'm writing it right now. I would need to add a few values in the YAML file. Like I want to add resources, and I would always need to set it to have a value like enable false. Because if I want to apply changes that are only for me, I need to make sure that I'm not affecting others. So my main preoccupation in that case would be, how do I introduce changes to the chart without affecting others? So in this case, hypothetical situation, I would have enabled false, remember that variable, and some data. Whatever, that data would be empty by default. And then I would need, I'm going to copy the snippet from this thing. Imagine that I'm not copying this just because I'm too lazy to write. The next thing I would need to do with in that scenario is that I would need to go to the chart. I would go to the deployment, and I would need to add something like this to my existing deployment, right? And this is where things over time become potentially ugly. I would say, hey, first of all, if the value of resources enabled, if the value of the enabled variable is set to false, do nothing, because the last thing I want is to affect everybody. This is only for me. So do nothing. And but if I, in my specific case, set this to true, then do something. And that something can be many different things. In this case, add this section resources, and then convert some value to YAML and indent it by 12, or there may be different scenarios. But basically, I start down the path of having potentially many if-else statements and things like that, because I cannot affect others. Now, in case of Kustomize, that same scenario would be exactly the same as the one I had before. So I would say I would create like this deployment patch that is only for me, nobody else. This is the one I showed when I was answering one of the questions. I say, hey, whenever I choose so, apply this patch, and this patch will find a container called DevOps Toolkit and add these resources. And the only really, apart from writing that file, the only thing that I would need to do is go to overlays production customization file. I have it here commented, but basically I would write those two lines here. I would say, hey, I want to apply a patch. The patch is defined here. That's it. That's what I want. And this is only for my overlay, for my environment, for my use case, nobody else. I'm not touching the base manifests, right? And in case of Helm, the last thing I would need to do is, because remember the values file that I showed before, where is it? Here, this value, which is default values, I set data to nothing and enabled false, because this is not supposed to affect everybody, but I cannot not have those values defined. And then I would create one that is specific to my environment, which would have basically these entries that would modify the resources variable to contain, enable true, and data would have all the resources that I want to define, whatever I want to inject in my deployment, right? And this now, again, can be interpreted in many different ways, right? And it really greatly depends on the preferences. When it's personally, when things are planned in advance, when we know what we want in advance, I tend to find Helm easier. But on the other hand, when there are things that need to apply only to me or to a limited number of people, the ability not to touch the base manifests in Kustomize is potentially awesome. This might be the first webinar I did in a long time where I didn't give a clear use this. I almost feel uncomfortable not saying Kustomize is better or Helm is better, but it really depends. So I was more aiming towards showing you how differences between the two. so that you might be able to draw your own conclusions. I can give you personal preference. I'm more and more using personally Kustomize instead of Helm, but that is under no conditions recommendation. That means that Kustomize is better. It really depends. More questions, I guess.
Yep, we have one more question, and keep them rolling, guys. We have another 10 minutes. If you have any questions for Viktor, pop them in the Q&A button using your Zoom toolbar. So from Oliver, one thing that bugs me for Kustomize is the amount of repetition of code. Like the first 10 lines are in deployment patch.yaml, have little to do with the resources being added. What do you think, Viktor?
Yes, that's absolutely correct. I mean, I would even go further. I would say that generally Kubernetes in general has a lot of repetition. Probably like 30% of manifests are bloated, unnecessary things that are not really. I mean, in this case, this is an example where I'm not really using a real manifest, but it would have a bunch of labels that are repeated across all the resources and annotations across all the resources, stuff like that. So I would answer that with yes. To begin with, Kubernetes has a lot of repetition, but if I focus now my attention between Kustomize and Helm, with Helm you have, let's say, potentially unnecessary if-else statements and conditional logics, while in Kustomize, depending on the number of patches you have that repetition that you always need to specify the path towards something that you're changing, right? In this case, this is basically the highlighted path. Actually, what I have highlighted right now is basically a path towards the part of the manifest that should be changed, and that's could be considered in a way repetition. Yes.
All right, and another question from Rasmus. My main point that brought me here today is I'm trying to avoid Helm for certain reasons, but Kustomize can get so wordy if you're trying to change tiny things, like an app label name in several places, or a single value like the CPU limit. Using both is an interesting option to use a values file for changing values, but does involve Helm again. What are your thoughts?
So I personally don't use. I use both Helm and Kustomize, but not for the same apps, let's say, or same definitions. I tend to go for one or the other. But I have friends or acquaintances, let's say, that are using both in combination, that they would, it's what I said before, that they would convert Helm using Helm template into YAML and then do some customized things. But personally, to me, that always sounded like a last resort that might not be worth the effort.
Thank you. And I have a question from Joshua. Helmsman is a great tool to run on top of Helm as it requires less in-depth knowledge of Helm and kubectl. Is there an equivalent tool for Kustomize?
I don't know, because I haven't used Helmsman myself. So the best thing I can do is write it down in my to-do list first to go through it. Now, independently of what Helmsman does, which I'm not familiar with, I haven't used tools on top of Kustomize. So, but that does not under any way, under any condition means that there aren't any. It's just that I haven't been looking for them. So this is embarrassing. I cannot answer the question. Sorry for that.
If anyone's familiar, please feel free and shout out in the chat. And then let's see. Why do you personally prefer Kustomize? Could you elaborate a little bit more, Viktor?
Yes, I somehow feel, and it's important that I'm using word feel more comfortable with not having templates in my declarative definitions of something. To be honest, if I would be going for templating solution, I would be more inclined of writing those definitions, let's say in Go directly, than in Helm. That's my personal kind of, my brain has a conflict with seeing templates in declarative definitions. So I prefer keeping it either very declarative or which is, I think, Kustomize basically, and avoid templates altogether. Or when I'm using templates, I personally prefer then going straight into a language, into whichever coding language you prefer, and just spitting them out from there. Personal.
And we have a couple more questions. Next one is from Charles. On the other way around, if the base deployment.yaml contains resources or environmental variables and I don't want them only for me, is it easier with Helm?
Wait, I need to read one more time. On the base deployment YAML contains resources and environment, and I don't want them only for me. I'm not sure I understood the question, but so I'm going to try to ask the same question a different way just to see whether I understood it. If the deployment already contains resources, environment variables, or sorry, the chart already contains all the things you need, and those things are needed not only for you, but for others. And if it already contains all the stuff, yes, Helm is much easier to use. If that was the question, if I understood it right. Because if you have a chart that has everything you need, and all you have to do is to change values, Helm is easier, without a doubt.
Thanks, and I just want to highlight a comment Joshua made in the chat here. He said he's heard a few people asking about using Helm to template customized files. As an alternative to Helm, he's used YTT for customizing YAML files, both related to Kubernetes. So if you want to check out that link, go ahead and open up the chat. And then from Oliver, another thing that is not possible with Kustomize is to make it explicit how values are iterated. For example, a port might be used in several places in the YAML. With Helm, there is an explicit via the value being reused. In Kustomize, it is implicit. Do you agree?
Yeah,
Victor?
with Kustomize. So the way how I think about it is that with Helm, you decide in advance what is modifiable, right? That does not mean that that cannot change over time, but basically for vast majority of users, you don't go through Helm templates. Values are your alpha and omega, right? With Kustomize, you are forced in a way to go and say, hey, okay, so this is the YAML, those are the definitions. This is what I want to change. This is how I change it, which is much more complicated. I mean, or easier, depending on the level of understanding of those things, right? Like, I really, there are many cases where I just, especially with third party, I just use Helm, and I still use it, even though I'm slowly switching towards Kustomize. I use Helm because it's easier. Hey, I want that Prometheus. I'm going to change host. That's it. But on the other hand, I had many examples of third-party charts also where I need to start going into the templates to understand what it really does and what I need and how I should. So the moment I start going into templates to start checking, understanding things, because the moment values file is not enough for me, I'm already starting thinking about Kustomize. As long as values is fine and gives me what I want, or very few changes in templates, then templates, Helm, in my personal opinion, tends to be easier. So it really, at least in my head, the major question was always, do I need to go to templates to understand? Do I need to go to templates or no? If I need to go to templates, that to me, that starts being more complicated with templates and Helm. And as long as I can get away mostly with values, then yes, I stick to Helm myself.
All right.
I'm not sure whether I answered your question, just if I didn't ask another.
Yeah, Oliver just posted in the chat if you'd like him to elaborate any further. While we wait for, yep, he said, yes, thank you. So perfect, thanks, Victor. If y'all have any more questions, we have a couple more minutes, but in the meantime, I wanna remind everyone to just follow CodeFresh on Twitter, LinkedIn, or Facebook. You're gonna hear about all of our upcoming events and especially talks from Victor. You even have a podcast coming out Thursday or Friday, which I will post as soon as it's available. So make sure and follow us so you get all of these great talks. Victor talks many different places, not just here on our webinars.
Or suggest a webinar. Suggest what if you have a subject. I haven't said that in previous webinars. If you have a subject that you're interested in, let us know. Let me know, and we'll organize a webinar or something and talk about it. Just let us know what you want to know.
Absolutely. You can send that directly to Viktor at vfarcic on Twitter, or you can just reply to my email that I'm going to send you with the recording. Those are both really easy ways. So whatever you prefer, if you have any ideas, very likely we will make that webinar happen for you. So it seems like that is all the questions for today, and we're just about done with time. So Viktor, thank you so much. This is an awesome side-by-side literal comparison webinar here. So we hope everyone will join us next time. Please look out for my email with the recording. Yeah, if you have any suggestions for upcoming webinars, please reply to me or reach out to Viktor. So thank you so much, everyone, for joining. Have a great rest of your day, and we'll see you next time on CodeFresh Live.
Cheers.